Hello! Today we're going to learn all about the 7 principles of design. The 7 principles of design are balance, rhythm, unity or harmony, proportion, variety, movement, and emphasis. The 7 principles of design are all the different ways that we use the elements of art to bring them together to create interesting effects in our artworks. The first principle of design is balance. Balance is how we use visual weight distributed in a composition to create a focal point. You can see in the examples, the first one, the one on the left, of a bridge. And you can tell that the visual weight is that very, very large, those arch shapes within the bridge structure, that large dark shape, that has a lot of weight in the picture. It takes up a lot of space. And then we see that it kind of splits the picture in half as well. So it has a little bit of balance there. Then we see on the image on the right side that this large circle with all these patterns and designs inside, that is balanced because it has a lot of the same shapes on both sides, or all throughout. And it takes up a lot of space within that whole artwork, therefore having a lot of weight to it. The first vocabulary word that we use to describe balance is bilateral symmetry. So bilateral symmetry is just a fancy way of saying that if we split something in half, it's going to be the same or pretty close to the same on both sides. You can see in the image on the left of that skull that we split that image in half, and then we have the same red line that is also on the right side. We have the same blue hues that are on the left side, also on the right side, and then the shapes and designs within the skull are same on both sides. And if we look at the picture of the woman, it is balanced because her face is the same on both sides, but then we also have some balance in that we have kind of the same amount of leaves, and then we have another animal on each side of that image, so we can split it in half and it has balance that way. The next vocabulary word is radial symmetry. Radial symmetry is when we have these same patterns repeating all throughout a circle. So we have a central point in each of these. Now we see on the one on the left is a design of all these geometric shapes that are happening again and again and again all throughout a circle. And we see in the image on the right that we have these flowers. And of course they are symmetrical. We have the same shape repeating all throughout a circle, even to some of them where they're alternating colors all throughout. The next word is asymmetry. So this would be something that is not the same on both sides. In the image on the left, we can see that we are drawn to the right side of the picture because we see these people that are happening on that right side of the picture, and the left side is pretty empty. And then, of course, the opposite would be this one on the right-hand side where we have all this farmer and his animals on the left side, and then we can see on the right side that it's pretty empty with just the pasture and maybe a few animals off in the distance. Then our next principle of design is rhythm. Rhythm is when elements are arranged to create a visual beat. So think about this like music, right? You have a beat like bum, ba bum, ba bum, ba bum. If you look at these image examples, we see that they're repeating a lot of shapes and repeating a lot of colors. That is the beat that's happening within artworks. Now, the difference between a rhythm and a pattern will always have the same thing, right? It will have like black, white, black, white, black, white, like a checkerboard. That is a pattern. But these are a little bit different. They repeat things, but not always within a certain order. That's the difference between rhythm and a pattern. Our next principle of design is unity, sometimes also called harmony. This is when different elements in a composition come together to create a sense of wholeness, a sense of commonality that holds the whole artwork together. So look at these examples here and think about them very carefully. If you look at this picture of boats, we see that the artist chose to have a lot of similar colors, all these different blues, but also all these different shades of browns as well. So the artist limited their palette. They also used very certain kinds of brush strokes, and even they used watercolors as well to, or maybe even a very watery type of paint to create this effect of water or flowiness in this image. Then we have this image on the right where everything is like very stretched out. Look at this individual with his hands on his face. Oh no, and he's stretching up from the bottom of the canvas. And then we have these people behind him that are very long and skinny. And even the artists use a lot of flowing brush strokes and very long stretched out brush strokes to help give us that idea. So everything's tying together to create a whole complete artwork. Our next principle of design is proportion. Proportion is how big something is in relation to something else. So artists use scale to make things either in or out of proportion. Take a look at the portrait that this artist is painting. Wow, that is a huge head. That is much, much, much larger than a real person's head. As we can see, the artist is standing right in front of it. The scale of it is massive. And there's a few vocabulary words we use to describe proportion as well. The first word is volume. Volume is the amount of space something takes up, where it either takes up space within an artwork or it takes up real actual space in front of us. As we can see with this balloon animal dog, it is a real sculpture that takes up space as an artwork that exists in real life. And we can imagine that it might be filled up with air and taking up all this space in front of us. If we were standing in front of it, it would be quite large. The image on the left is just a shaded sphere, and this person did a pencil drawing, and we can imagine that that sphere is 3D due to the way that they shaded it and drew it. So we're imagining in our mind that it takes up space within that artwork. Our next vocabulary word for proportion is exaggeration, and that's making things bigger to draw our attention to a focal point. Take a look at this example of these children are imagining this cloud as a giant in the sky. It's so huge, and we're drawn to how big that is in relation to how small these children are within this artwork. And then, of course, this funny example of this artwork on the right side of this little baby chick that is absolutely like a monster size next to this tractor and this farmer. Of course, much, much, much larger, exaggerated, way beyond the scale of a real life baby chick. Our next way to describe proportion is to show distance. Now I want you to take a look at the examples here. We can see this girl lying in this field, and she is almost larger than this farmhouse. But we know that she's larger than the farmhouse because she's supposed to be closer to us. The artist is supposed to be showing us that she's closer to us in this image, and that the farmhouse is much farther away. Therefore, she would appear larger to us. And we also have this painting of this bird in the sky, and we're imagining that maybe this, from our bird's eye view, this bird is looking down, and look how small this forest and these trees look compared to this bird. From up in the sky, everything would look so small. And our next vocabulary word to describe proportion is perspective. And that is when things get smaller as they get farther away. They also have less detail. Look at these examples here. This image where these people holding umbrellas. So we have these people in the foreground that are very detailed. We can see a lot of even the wrinkles in their clothes. We can see the details of their face. And then we have many, many other people in the background as well, but they get a little bit less detailed until they're just like tiny little black lines in the background. We also have these buildings where we can see the details of the windows, maybe up closer, but then it gets smaller, smaller, smaller in these rows until they shrink farther away. Look, this artist even put so much detail into the cobblestones in the street where we see this, each individual stone and like the wet glossiness of the rain, and then as it gets farther away, these little cobblestones get smaller and smaller until they just become a blur in the background. That's perspective. Our next principle of design is variety. And variety is how artists make things interesting by using all different kinds of shapes and patterns and lines and colors. Look at how much interesting variety is in these images here, these colors that are being used, these lines that are being used. We could look at these artworks for quite a long time and notice many, many, many different details of all these little faces and eyes and little dots and squiggly lines. There's a lot of interesting things to look at in these artworks that use variety. Our next principle of design is movement. Movement is when the artist arranges all the elements in the composition to create a look of action and to guide our eyes through the artwork. Take a look at this example of this giant wave. We imagine that this wave is moving from the left side to the right side and maybe even crashing downward just due to the way that it's shaped, due to the lines that are bending down and this spray, these dots of sea foam that are in the air. We imagine this is a very dynamic image and that these poor people that are in these boats might be in for a very rough ride. Our next principle of design is emphasis. Emphasis makes things pop out, makes things stand out. Artists can create emphasis by highlighting things, by making lines converge and come together, or by making different color choices to make things stand out that way. Take a look at this image on the left. We have these people that are all standing in a row here, and they're all wearing these brighter colors, and that makes them pop out from everyone else around them. They also maybe kind of have a pattern to them due to the way that they're lining up. That makes it stand out from everyone else as well. And then of course we have this image on the right of this woman swinging in a garden, and she's wearing a light pink or reddish pink frilly dress, and then we have these blues and greens in the background, and that's making it pop out due to the way this artist chose complementary colors of the image. So to review, our 7 principles of design are balance, rhythm, unity or harmony, proportion, variety, movement, and emphasis.